Ladies and gentlemen, this is Henry Confidential, and this is the Against the Grain podcast. This is the episode 5, the 5th episode. I have Joseph Olivas with me. Joseph, when I started this concept of this show, you were one of the first people I thought of because A, you have an eclectic film, knowledge and taste, and you spread it around, but you do pretty good with, discussing films. But also, I don't think me and you are like 100% parallel with our taste, so I thought that this would be a good chance to talk films. So with our high end films, we agree on a lot, but with the middle to low end, we don't always see eye to eye. So today's gonna be an interesting episode. So what is your thought on the concept of the Against Grain podcast, especially when I first introduced it to you, and then what are your thoughts, without giving specifics of the movies, of the 4 that we're going to talk about today?
I like the concept because it gives the opportunity for people to have like an open discussion, but also civilized enough to have a polite uh, back and forth, but not really all out back and forth
Yeah.
because it's ultimately a show that allows the viewpoint of art being subjective to show its full colors because people have different opinions on different movies. So it's good to hear some people say why they're not the biggest fan of them, or people and other people say why it hits them more personally than others. So I liked it. I was kind of nervous about what you picked for me to because I thought it was okay the first time I saw it, but yeah, giving it a shot. I have some other thoughts, and I'm
There,
eager to hear what you have to say about my pick as well.
Absolutely. So, with that said, were you able to watch all 4 movies or rewatch all 4, or do you have a good enough opinion on all 4? So we'll have a pretty good discussion.
So my so the two movies I have rewatched, not not like in the past week or so,
Yeah.
but I have rewatched them in order to develop strengths of mine. So I do feel like I'm pretty familiar with them in terms of what I like about them. Uh, in regards to the other two, the one that you picked for me, I did rewatch. I actually just finished rewatching it right before we started. And the other one, I saw it once because it was the one that was highly rated on your letterbox that I did not have the biggest expectations for. And that was my first time watch. But it was a few months ago when we were thinking about doing it, but
Okay.
then some other things got in the way. And so, like, but I still have some things to say about that movie.
There we go. So, with that said, it's actually an interesting dynamic between these 4 films. We have 2 sports films and 2 period pieces. I guess that's the commonality for the other ones. I guess technically your movies are period pieces and my movies are sports films. So, let's go ahead and start off with the first time watch, and let's start off with Tim Burton's Big Fish. This
Okay.
is a movie that I watched for the first time, and the reason that I wasn't expecting much from it is because I'm not an anti Tim Burton person, but I'm not the biggest Tim Burton fan. Like, he definitely has a distinct style, and going into this film, I'd seen that it was highly rated, and it had a lot of people saying it's not as Tim Burton as you would expect. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because the things that are Tim Burton at least stand out, so it's memorable, for better or for worse. And the things that also he does are potentially could be for the worse, because it could be a little goofy and weird. So I wasn't, I never wanted to rush out to see it. So when we decided to do this show, this wasn't my first pick, but since we had to reschedule things, it ended up being, later on my pick, and I'm glad I watched it because I don't necessarily love the movie, but I definitely have a nice respect for it. You know what I mean? It was pretty enjoyable. Ewan McGregor does a really fantastic job embodying this fantastical, you know, happy, good outlook person. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, that I feel like that's the primary message in the movie, is just having a positive outlook on life, for better or for worse. We go through our ups and downs and our struggles, and things aren't always, you know, as, you know, perfect as we want it to be, but it's also sometimes not as interesting as we'd want it to be. So sometimes you have to spice it up a little bit to make it memorable, because at the end of the day, we all want to kind of have an impact in life and have a purpose. So even if our end result isn't impactful for like the world, if we can spice it up a little bit and make it more memorable for ourselves, if we're able to pass that down and talk about the conversation, it might be more memorable for them. So even if my story doesn't impact you, if I'm able to make it interesting, you are more likely to remember it and be impacted by it. So I didn't really. So my only issue with the movie, and it's not like an issue, it just I didn't feel it as much, is the actual like present day stuff. The anything involving Billy Crudup. I just I don't know. I mean, you understand what they're doing in the movie of the disconnect between the father and son. So by the end, it does have a nice moment, but leading up to it, you don't really feel that true connection because throughout the movie, the actual interesting, engaging parts are the past times with Ewan McGregor. I never felt anything, and also I'm not a big Billy Crudup guy, so it was hard to connect to him. So like I said, towards the end, when it's actually when you get the I don't want to say it a twist, but like the revelation of what the ultimate goal of the movie is, like I was saying, the positivity and is it true what he went through, is it not, are these people real, are they fabricated, X, Y, and Z. So that part, it was like, oh, that's really interesting, and I do enjoy that. But like I said, that's not specifically related to Billy Crudup and his storyline. It's more Ewan McGregor and the present day dad. So like I said, it's not a negative on it, and I'm not knocking it for it, but I just didn't have that connection and that that gut punch that you might have felt personally, or that single teardrop or nothing like that. So I don't have anything negative in the movie, but it didn't quite connect like I was hoping it could. But I did enjoy the story, and I am happy I watched it. What's your review on Big Fish?
So I have a little bit of a story for Big Fish and how I got to
Okay.
get to it. When I first saw it, I saw it without knowing I saw it. I was, let me think, 7 or 8 years old when I was traveling on a bus with my family. And then this movie popped up. This was one of the movies that the bus was playing for people on the bus. And uh, I remember like specific parts of it. I remember the witch's eye. I remember the werewolf ringmaster, Amos Calloway. And I also remember the fight among the daffodils. And I remember seeing this and thinking, I kind of enjoyed this movie, not really understanding it though. I just liked the different adventures that Ewan McGregor, Ed Bloom went on. And then I kept also thinking that Ewan McGregor looked like Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. So
Okay.
years later, I was still a kid. I didn't recognize faces like that too much. But then later on, when I tried to find that movie as an older person, I was like, what was that one movie with Tobey Maguire that I saw
I
years
remember.
ago?
Dang it! You brought this up on a show. Which I don't remember which show it was, but I do remember hearing this story. At least this part of it. That's funny.
And then I never found it. I looked through Tobey Maguire movies, and I'm like, none of these look like the movie that I was watching. It was just by pure chance that I checked out Big Fish because I wanted to see other Tim Burton movies that I saw it, and then those scenes happened. I was like, that's the movie that I saw on that bus. Wow. And as for the movie, but yeah, that's my like nostalgic kind of view on the
I
movie.
love it.
But as for the movie itself, I think, and for me personally, because this year I've been seeing the majority or close to all of Tim Burton's movies to
Okay.
use it as a strengthen movie trivia games and for different movies and use seeing in my perspective from what I see and seeing this movie, for some reason there's something about it that I feel very impressed by it because it's a director like Tim Burton who has, like you said, that distinct style that he's made a name for himself in making movies with, like for like Beetlejuice, the Batman movies with Michael Keaton, and then for him to make a movie like this that makes him like step well, not step back, but like hold back
Yeah.
on going full Tim Burton, but also making this story, this fantastical story, like you were saying, that focuses on how Billy Crudup and Albert Finney, the older Ed Bloom, and Will Bloom are trying to reconnect, kind of, because of this sort of facade that Ed Bloom has created for himself in terms of how fantasy like his stories are and how they clash in reality with how Will Bloom sees him because he feels like he's been lying to him
Yeah.
for years. And then later he grows and sees and learns more about how these stories aren't actually entirely false. They just have that like spice to it
Yeah.
because it's his way, Ed Bloom's way, the father, of like trying to help others feel better
Yeah.
and also try to make people try to add more life to people in a way. Like it was a little strange for me at times because it felt like that's a very anti Tim Burton concept, and then seeing that play out was like a little weird. But then seeing it in terms of all the or almost all the rest of his filmography, I felt like this movie is actually a very I feel like I respect this movie a lot more seeing it how it compares to the rest of his filmography and how much he dedicated to it in terms of where Tim Burton was personally, because from what I've read in terms of behind the scenes stuff, he actually made it a couple of years later after his parents had died. So him making that movie now looks a little more personal about how that father son duo and dynamic works and has that impact at the end. I didn't quite cry in it. I don't consider myself an easy crier in movies,
Yeah.
but I do feel that big gut punch at the end of the movie when it culminates into that uh, fantasy reconciliation world, and in terms of how how much beauty there is in all the stories, but also in terms of how much positivity Ed Bloom brings to it. That's what really stands out to me, and that's why I like it a lot when seeing a lot of not only seeing a lot of other Tim Burton movies, but also seeing it on it by itself. It's a movie that I really love.
So that reminds me, so the buildup was really good of Ed Bloom going about finding his wife and his determination and his patience. But once they actually got together, I felt like there wasn't a true payoff to their relationship in terms of really feeling the connection once they get to that point. You know what I mean? Like, because the build up is so admirable that you love the fact that he went to great lengths and he was willing to be as patient as he was. You know, getting working to get the one clue slash piece of information about her per month, and it was like that's like I said, that's admirable. But once they actually got together, because he went off to war, so they got separated there, and different things where you never truly got really a lot with them together. So it's just one thing missing. And once again, like I said, no technical negatives on the movie. Like, it was shot well, the music was really nice. It's not overbearing. You know what I mean? There's nothing about it, especially from a Tim Burton film, where you expect the music to like be a character in the movie. So it didn't have that, but it was nice. It was a nice background. I wouldn't say somber, but just nice, good music in the background. And like I said, it was shot well, and the period, like obviously we know Tim Burton's really good at set design and production and all that stuff, so it looked good. Like I said, it's just missing something, and by the end, I feel like this was more the writing than the actual like execution of the film of why it just missed that punch once you saw everyone show up, and you're like, man, that really is real. Because Billy Crudup's character is like, oh crap, I was underestimating him this entire time. You know what I mean? It's one of those things, just that
Yeah,
respect for Ed Bloom, like Danny DeVito, the tall man. And I don't remember all the specific names, but all those characters where they when you hear throughout the whole story, and you're like, not only are these people real, but like they're exactly like the tall man, like how he's like 7 feet tall or whatever, and it's like, wow, he really is tall compared to like the shorter person. So it's one of those things where it's not just exaggerated, but it also happened. So there are a lot of moments in it where I was like, I'm really happy I'm seeing this, but I'm just missing that emotional connection. And a movie that's not as fun, especially for a Tim Burton movie, where you can kind of forgive the lack of emotion or connection, you would want that to have it at the payoff. So like I said, it's not a bad movie by any stretch of imagination. I'm going to give it a positive rating, but it's just missing just something for me. So obviously it's not a favorite, and I'm floating in between if I want to give it 3 stars or 4 stars. If you know my ratings, I don't do half stars. So 3
Anymore.
stars, yeah, exactly. I switched it up because I really want to separate, and this is a good example of why I want to separate because since I think it's missing something, it's like I really want to give it a good movie, a 4-star rating, where I consider it a good movie because it has a lot of the elements that fit that box, but it also is missing something. So it's like, is it serviceable or is it good? And I think as of right now on a first-time watch, I'm going good or serviceable. So I'm going to go 3 stars out of 5. So it's still positive, and I'm really happy I saw it, at least for a first-time watch. And if it ever gets to a point where I get a trivia question on it, there's a lot to be asked about it. So, having seen it, it definitely, I'm glad I've seen it. So what's this rating for you, and what are your thoughts on my rating?
So I'm just glad that you were able to find enough positive things about it to make it worthwhile, or to make you feel like it was worthwhile your time. I don't necessarily fault you for only giving it 3 out of 4 because, like we were talking about, it's such an anti Tim Burton movie.
Yeah.
I've been rewatching almost of his movies. I've rewatched all of them this year except for Sweeney Todd because I already had notes for that movie, so I didn't feel like I needed to rewatch it compared to other movies. But in terms of rewatching this movie compared to all his other movies, I feel like sometimes he gets a little out of hand with his style. Like he doesn't know when to rein it in sometimes. I feel like sometimes he goes out of hand and it's either way too gothic in terms of how much he's doing it for himself, but also it kind of takes back away from the story. I feel like sometimes some of my least favorite ones, some of my least favorite Tim Burton movies like Dark Shadows and Dumbo and Planet of the Apes
I like
feel
Dumbo.
like
I like Dumbo.
Dumbo's fine.
I'm like one of the only ones.
I don't hate Dumbo. I just don't think it's very memorable in terms of
Oh no,
his other
it
movies.
started off as a 4.5 when I first saw it back when I did halves. Then it went down to a 4, and as time's gone by, it's gone down to a 3. But it's more positive. It's just forgettable, like you said. So I really enjoy the movie.
Yeah.
That if I rewatch it, it would go back up to a 4. But as of right now, it's gone down to a 3 because I'm like, I don't remember specifics right now. But the animated,
Yeah,
I like that one.
Yeah, my thing with Dumbo is that it's forgettable. Like it's a movie that unless I study for it, I don't remember it's Tim Burton necessarily. But that's another
Okay.
topic for another time. But in terms of story wise and style, I felt like this movie was like a great example of how he develops not only that central story with father and son, and then also sprinkle it with his touch in specific moments that enhance the storyline. Really helps the movie, at least from my perspective. I can understand what you were saying about how the Ed Bloom and Sandra with Alison Lohman's character as the younger version, and then Jessica Lange's character as the older version, may not necessarily be the greatest. I can kind of see what you're saying. It feels like they show how the build up to that relationship starts, and then it only fast forwards years later when you see them as old people, and then you see them already together and already loving each other. It feels like there are two ends of the story, and like it doesn't entirely show how they grow in between.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I really love both ends of the story, so like I kind of forgive it in a way. I kind of really, really like Jessica Lange more also in more movies. I see her, this and Tootsie. And then with this, and then at the beginning, I feel like there's at least enough heart at both ends for me to at
Yeah.
least look past it, give it some flexibility. But I can see what you're saying. I can see where you're coming from.
And before we move on, when you were talking about like a style and dialing it back, it's similar to like how he did Ed Wood, where he sprinkles enough of his style in there, but he's able to really focus on the primary story, and it does like the Tim Burtonisms doesn't take away from the central plot and the character, and I do give him credit for that. So when you think of the quality Tim Burton films that aren't overpowered by his style, Big Fish and Ed Wood are probably his two better ones. So.
I'd
I will
argue,
always recommend it. So
yeah, I'd argue Big Eyes is also really, really great in showing him developing that story and really, really dialing it back on his
I haven't seen it
style
yet,
when
so
unless the story calls for it. If you ever get a chance to see Big Eyes, I'd also recommend that.
all right, well, good to know. So that was a Big Fish from Tim Burton. I give it recap. I give it a 3 star. And is it a 4.5 or a 5 for you?
So on rewatches, it's gone up to 4.5
Okay,
for me.
boom. All right, so three star for me and 4.5 for Joseph. So we're gonna move over to Joseph's first time watch. So introduce it, give your initial opinion, and then I will give my review.
Okay, so looking at your lists, your ratings and 5 star ratings and 4 star ratings, there were a couple of movies that I saw there that made me feel like, wow, wow, there are a lot of movies that I agree with, and a lot of movies that I'm like, huh, that's an interesting movie for a 5 star rating. Uh, there were a number of comedies that also caught my attention or that made me feel like that's weird that I don't recall seeing someone give this a 5 star rating. But at the same time, I understand like comedy is subjective, especially because
Absolutely.
things that make some people laugh don't make other people laugh. And me trying to broaden my horizons with comedies has been very mixed over the years. Some movies I laugh more at, I like a lot because I laugh. Others are like I feel like I'm missing something. I don't laugh at things that people laugh and say is funny, and it kind of takes away from me. Um, and one of those movies that I was not expecting to see so given so positive a rating was Dodgeball, a true underdog story. I had seen bits and pieces of it, like the whole wrench throwing scene and a couple of pieces with Ben Stiller's character Dwight or White. I keep forgetting if it's White
White,
Goodman.
yeah, White Goodman.
Yeah, White Goodman. I feel like people say that he's hilarious. I just feel like he's kind of lame trying to be so macho, and I'm like, well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe it plays out differently in terms of how it's seen in the overall movie, and it's not really for me. It's a movie that I watched for trivia a couple of months ago. I actually watched this movie with the other sports movie that's gonna be talked about later, and yeah, I felt every bit as annoyed as I'd expected. I look again, comedy is subjective. I don't want to like bash it on the specific grounds I don't I don't think that this movie should be laughed at. If you like it and laugh it, more power to you. I just don't find this humor all that appealing. I feel super annoyed when some characters like White try to go in the most over the top kind of vulgar sexist type of things, or at least it feels like it's trying to get at the what's her name, the girl cat Kate. When he's
Yeah.
trying to get at Kate, it feels like, okay, you're back off, like calm down. You don't have to be the most man type macho kind of character to get her. You're clearly a loser and something like that. Like I don't know, man. Like I don't. It's not a movie for me. I don't. Again, comedies. I've tried to. I do want to see. I do want to like try to understand that people have different tastes in comedies, and so I don't. I don't personally love it, but like more power to others who can laugh at it. I just can't. That doesn't mean that I hated it all. I did like a couple of parts of it. That final dodgeball throw was kind of cool, mostly because I got to see White lose. So spoilers, sorry. uh, but also, more movies I see him in, I like him more and more. Stephen Root, I
Yep.
think, is a really, really great actor as a character and as a character actor and supporting supporting character actor. I think his character of Gordon is kind of seeing him go from like insecure with his with his relationships with his wife, and then building confidence for himself at the end. By the end, that was kind of cool. I don't completely hate this movie, but I struggle to like it too much. But anyway,
All right,
that's
so
my
so your
impressions.
initial question, I guess, is why is it a 5 star? So similar to what we were just talking about with the 3 star versus 4 star comparison. So 5 star at that point, I consider that a favorite movie regardless. So I take objectivity out of it. So for example, if I want to make The Room a 5 star movie because I love it, whether I love it for the
Ooh,
right reasons or not, that's why I separate it that way, because it's a Henry movie. You know what I mean? So it's in its own category of its own. It's not, you really don't have a rating on it. It's just a 5. It's in my 5 star collection. Whereas a 4 star, it's objectively a good movie, and then a 3 star, 2 star. You know what I mean? So it goes down the line. So that's why a movie like this fits in that realm, because it's one of those movies that, if you think of what the story is in of itself, Dodgeball, a true underdog story. Peter LaFleur, he has his own gym, and it's going out of business essentially, or it's trying to be taken over, bought out. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where they're the underdog already, because you have characters like Gordon going to the gym, clearly not in shape, clearly not getting the
yeah,
job done, but it's a place for him to go and feel welcome. I mean, honestly, think about it like what we do with movies here online. You know what I mean? We could be out in public talking to real people in real life, but instead we're hanging out with people in the movie. You know what I mean? It's our own way to feel accepted and loved, and things like that. So a movie like this, it really shows that opportunity to realize that that can be accepted. So the reason I personally think that you have White as so over the top and so dramatic in his bullyisms and his bullying antics is because, A, clearly he is a punk loser, like you said, and he needs the machismo and the money and the muscles, or lack of potentially, and the pumping of his wiener. You know what I mean? We all know that scene where he's
yeah,
overcompensating for everything. You know what I mean? So it's kind of the two ends of the spectrum of the loser: the people who accept it and accept others, and the people who bully and reflect. Because I mean, think about any movie where it's an interesting comparison. I just thought of it literally just now. But whenever you watch a movie that involves gay relations and a lot of homophobia, a lot of times later on in the movie they end up to be curious or gay themselves, and that's the way that they lash out. So think of White as that character. He's not gay obviously, but he's a bully, or he's a loser. So he uses his bullying antics and he attempts to be powerful and strong and rich to overcompensate from inherently being a loser himself. So that's why I love the comparison between the two. And then I love Justin Long's character, how he's, doing his own thing, where it's a combination of he likes a girl, but also he kind of likes the cheerleading. You know what I mean? It's fun. It has its own, part of it. And then you have Rip Torn. Everything with it, with his character, is just, it's just fun. Like, if you, there's really no other way to
mm,
describe it. If you can dodge a ball, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. You know what I mean? Duck, dip, dodge, duck, and dodge. You said dodge twice. Shut up. You know what I mean? Like, it's fun. You know what I mean? That's what you remember this movie for. And then you have small little moments from Gary Cole and Jason Bateman as just the commentators. And think about it. It's, ESPN 8 the Ocho, and you know what I mean? They're a dodgeball competition that is going to win the exact amount of money that they need to save the gym. You know what I mean? It's not trying to rewrite the book and be crazy, but it's essentially a metaphor for overcoming the odds and accepting, you know what I mean, and love, and just, being yourself, but also not giving up on yourself, and also not trying to be something you're not. You know what I mean? So I feel like it culminates all those lessons, and I feel like that's why I connect to it. So it's one of those where, yeah, sure, I could give it a 3 star movie because it's a serviceable comedy, or I can give it a 5 star movie because I love how it connects to, you know what I mean, that the message that it's implying. So it's weird that I'm comparing the two, because it's clearly a different movie from Big Fish, but like similar, that's what I was saying, where Big Fish was missing that connection that I was talking about. So for me, the story, as long as it's fun and as long as I can connect to it, I don't care what it is, whether it's emotional connection, whether it's like a relationship, a father-son, whether it's a friendship, whatever. If I can connect to it in some way, I give it a lot more credit, because when you think of a memorable movie, that's what you think of. You think of those connections and how you can put yourself in those shoes, especially while watching it. You know what I mean? And we're definitely going to get into that later with my pick for your poorly rated movie. You know what I mean? Of how you're able to go in those shoes. So I feel like that's why Dodgeball is one of those movies where it's just a lot of fun. And obviously, that's where the comedy becomes subjective. You know what I mean? If you don't like the comedy, because I don't think it's like Adam Sandler humor, which, I'm 50-50 on his movies. Like, I like his movies, but the humor, it doesn't get to me. So I don't think it's like that type of humor. But also, I agree that it's not the most highbrow at the same time. You know what I mean? It's right in the middle for its type of humor. It's not the smartest comedy in terms of the actual humorous moments, like the comedy itself. But I do think the story is pretty, I wouldn't say, like, rewriting history as well, but I feel like it's smarter than you would assume going in. You know what I mean? So, what are your thoughts on things I've just said on this Dodgeball review?
So like I like how you're pointing your I liked how how you're analyzing the overcompensation that White is doing in the movie. I hadn't thought about it that way. Like I think that's an interesting way and more fun way of looking at it instead of being annoyed at all his things.
Exactly.
In terms of the characters like going through this underdog story, I can see where you're coming from. Like this underdog story is like inherently kind of appealing to most people because they feel like underdogs in at least something. So seeing them overcome their obstacles in order to get to the top of the uh, dodgeball championship and able to get there and be victorious at the end, it's like you can kind of see why people would root for them, even if the humor doesn't appeal for me. And like I can see what you're saying about how the storyline is entertaining in terms of how that underdog story develops. I just didn't laugh at that much or be
Sure.
or I was too distracted by some of the weirdisms and the things and bullyisms that White was doing and other characters doing this weird stuff. Alan Tudyk is this weird pirate guy, and I felt like, okay, I can see that he's trying to be funny and like,
Steve the
but it
Pirate,
does.
man. That's his way. That's how he stands out. That's what he's attempting. You know what I mean? To identify himself. You know what I mean? So like I said, if you don't understand that, and if you don't connect to it, or at least respect the metaphor of why he's doing that, then I totally get why it wouldn't connect to you. So that's also why I like this discussion and why I'm a little more passionate about it, because I would rather you judge the movie with having these thoughts in mind and still not agreeing with them versus not understanding the weird metaphors, because I really do feel like there's a lot of different metaphorical aspects that go into play, like you just said with the White, and you actually did like that one after thinking about it. So I'm really glad we're having this discussion.
Nice. Anything else that you wanted to ask about or talk about the
What is your
dodgeball?
what's your rating?
Um, so like again, the humor was more annoying to me than funny to me. I didn't really enjoy myself watching it that much. But at the same time, there were parts that I did like. There are parts scattered around in here and there that feel like, okay, I can like latch onto this more. I latch on more to Stephen Root's character because I like Stephen Root more among all these other characters. And the very end is like, okay, that was funny. Seeing White lose, that loser guy is that was funny. But like, I don't know, it's just too much. Not that doesn't appeal to me in terms of what works and doesn't work. I like when it hits low, it goes low for me. But at the same time, there were some decent parts. But I'm leaning towards more like a 1.5 out of 5. It's not my favorite thing in the world. Sorry, and it's not a movie that I kind of want to watch over and over again. Sorry.
I was not expecting that low. Yikes. My guy. Oh my good. Okay. Well, I was not expecting that. I was expecting somewhere between a 2.5 and a 3. So I'm pretty bummed out. All right. Well, Okay, comment below
Sorry,
if you're
yeah.
more on the Joseph side with this one, or if you're on my side with this. Obviously, I don't expect you to be on my side in terms of 5 star because you know how I rate movies and I categorize it with the favorites. You know what I mean? That's where you take you know objectivity out of it. That's literally just a Henry movie. But if you think it's anywhere between a 3 and a 4 star for you, comment below, which is also my side. And if you think it's just generally rotten or one of the worst movies you've ever seen, like Joseph, comment below, Joseph. So now we're gonna move on to. Okay, go ahead.
I will say one quick thing. It was not the worst movie that I saw for sports comedies when studying for that. In terms of Adam Sandler humor that you mentioned, there's one Adam Sandler movie that really, really pissed me off more than this movie. But that's a
Yeah.
discussion for another
No,
day.
you got to tell the name, and then maybe I'll bring you on for next episode to talk about it. Which movie?
It's called The Water Boy.
Oh yeah, we will be talking about that when Joseph returns. Stay tuned for part 2 of this with Joseph discussing the Waterboy. So let's move on to the against the grain technical portion of it, where we check out each other's letterboxes and we choose a 2.5 or 2 star or lower rating, and something that we completely disagree with. So we'll start with mine because as you see in the title, we'll save that for the quote unquote main event. So I have a little backstory similar with you with your Big Fish story of why The Last of the Mohicans was not a movie that I enjoyed. So I have a buddy where he has a few cursed movies, whether it's he went to the
Ooh.
theater and the film just kept messing up, or the theater messed up, or you have distractions in the theater, or whenever you watch it home on Blu-ray it skips, or something happens where you've tried to watch a specific movie multiple times and it just didn't go your way. The Last of the Mohicans was my thing for me, and I didn't remember it until I went to go rewatch it. So when we were discussing it, you were like, "Why don't you like it?" And I honestly was just giving a generic answer. I was bored, but I truly forgot that I had a Blu-ray. So I buy my Blu-rays from a store called Disc Replay, and I've bought probably over 700 movies from there, and I've really never had any issues. I've only had 3 issues now at this point out in 700. I had Crash, where it completely was broken, so I had to upgrade on Vudu.
The
The
Best
world,
Picture winner, Crash?
yeah, which is
Oh
great.
boy.
Which is great. It's great. We'll talk about that another day too, maybe. Uh,
Okay.
the World's End, where it would only skip during the explosion at the end of the movie, so
Oh.
it was really bad timing. So for the longest, it was my least favorite of the trilogy because it really affected how I ended my in that movie. And then the Last of the Mohicans, where I don't have specific moments when it skipped because it's just one of those where the movie as a whole didn't stick, so I don't have specific scenes where it skipped, but it skipped multiple times, and I literally probably skipped a half hour of the movie to get move on. So there was something that was missing. So when I went to rewatch this movie, I went in with an open mind of like I don't have any technical real reasons why it was a 2 star movie for me, because when you think of why I consider what I consider a 2 star, how I label it, it's just a waste of time or boring depending on what the movie is. So for me, I forgot about the skipping part. So in the movie, it was just so forgettable and boring, and I didn't connect to it, and I didn't enjoy anything of it. So when I went in, I was like, all right, yeah, it just didn't have it, it just didn't work for me. So I went in with an open mind with this, and Daniel Day-Lewis is one of my favorite actors. Everyone knows, There Will Be Blood is one of my favorite movies of all time. So Daniel Day-Lewis, I have that connection with him regardless. I'll always go in for him at the end of the day, no matter what. And I love The Revenant. If you look at my 5 stars, you know that I have The Revenant as a 5 star movie. So I'm not anti this general time period. It's just I need to connect to the story. So I went in and I was like, all right, let's see what happens. And the main 2 things I will get out of this is Daniel Day-Lewis I would say he's great. Like he's really good. Like there's nothing about it that makes me think of Daniel. This is a top tier Daniel Day-Lewis performance. Not that it's anything bad, but he does a good job of like being the love interest, being the I wouldn't say action hero, but like dealing with the fighting, and then also not infiltrating, but like just going into the other clan or whatever you want to call him. So it's one of those things where he just does his job. You know what I mean? So he does a really good job. So he's the main point where I'm like, he's good. Obviously, that's you're never gonna say he's not good. And then I really like the score. The score was really good in this movie, where it just fits what we're doing and what we're going for, both the action and also the love scenes, and just kind of the transitional moments of just going through the story. Especially when you have a movie like this that on paper has a chance to have some boring moments, especially with my history of it. And I assumed it was going to have a lot of boring moments. When I was actually paying
Mm,
attention and looking at it from a film study perspective, the score really stood out. So those are my two main points coming out of this on the rewatches. Daniel Day-Lewis is really good as always, and the score is really good. So when I went in, the first like half hour, it builds the universe and like the world of what they're going with, and you kind of have to, see both sides of the main characters and the main groups. So it takes a minute to get going, and it's not in a bad way, but it's also one of those things I forgot that like the action is pretty there's a lot of action in this movie, and it like the fighting is pretty visceral, and I was like, man, this is actually pretty cool. So I will spoil it right away that I'm positive on the movie. You know what I mean? I don't love it. It's not one of my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis movies, and it's not. Is this Jim Sheridan? Is Jim Sheridan?
Michael Mann directed it.
Really? Oh wow, I didn't even pay attention to that. Okay, so it's definitely not one of my favorite Michael Mann movies. Which it's funny that I didn't realize that in the same week I watched this and Thief Thief, and that's a weird connection. Sometimes it happens that way. But anyway, so it's not one of my top tier movies for both of them, but it did a really good job, and I'm definitely going to pick The Revenant over this in terms of this style of movie. But I am happy that coming out of it, I enjoyed the movie, and I'll tell you what I'm going to bump the rating up to it in a second. But what's your review, and why do you have it highly rated?
So, in terms of watching a movie and seeing it through the overall perspective of a director's filmography, I was able to watch or rewatch all of Michael Mann's movies last year because I wanted to make that as a strength of mine in movie trivia. About the score, there's a thing about this movie score that I really really love because I actually first heard this movie score at a martial arts tournament. This was played during like a martial arts skit type of thing that was being performed by this studio. And when I later found out that this is from The Last of the Mohicans, I was like, "Oh, hey, I recognize that one. That's pretty cool." Um, yeah, but aside from that, I felt like this movie showed Michael Mann trying to build on his filmmaking skills and not just stay
Crime
crime
genre, yeah.
within the crime genre because at this point he had made Thief, The Keep, and Manhunter. He had two crime related movies and then one lesser kind of movie that he tried to make into like a period piece with also some fantasy supernatural elements that I don't think really works. So seeing it from this perspective, with this being his fourth movie and his newest stab at like a period piece, it felt like to me like this is like maybe kind of like a do-over. Like
Okay.
he wants to do this better. My laptop is running low on battery. One moment, please. I'm sorry.
You all right? So I'll vamp for a second. So that's interesting that you said that with the Michael Mann thing of how it gives him a chance to not I don't want to say reinvent himself, but like not put himself in a box, which is fun that we're having that discussion. The same episode we're similarly talking about that with Tim Burton, where you have what you're known for and what you're good at, but also he hadn't even quite mastered that aspect of it. Like after finally watching Thief, and I haven't seen Manhunter. I've heard a lot of good things, but I know it's considered like raw. You know what I mean? So Heat is really polished in filmmaking and in the crime genre specifically. So seeing the transition from like those, I wouldn't say low budget, but those like smaller films world wise, you know what I mean? The world is small in what they're doing, and then going to this where the world is pretty big. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people you're covering over, and you're really trying to get
Oh
on
yeah,
both sides. And I do respect that. So it definitely is a leap from his previous movies. Well, I don't know The Keep, but assuming that it's leap from that.
yeah. It's not. It's my least favorite of Mann's movies. I don't think that there are a ton of stuff that flesh and like mesh together, and there's a lot of underdeveloped stuff for me. But that's another topic for another day. But yeah, I don't want to go on too many tangents unless necessary. But yeah, I wanted to continue on with in terms of what Michael Mann strays from his usual genre. I feel like this. and and Heat, which came after this movie. This Heat was the movie that he did after Last of the Mohicans. I felt like Last of the Mohicans was like kind of a stepping stone build up for him to lead up to his grandioso crime epic that is
Yeah.
Heat, in terms of how he sets up the mood. Because I think that that's something that he has a good eye for, setting up the mood. He has these really great scenes of nature, and with that backdrop of Trevor Jones's score, and that's similar to what I feel like he does with Thief, in terms of how he puts the Tangerine Dream score to the scenes of the heists
Yeah.
that James Caan's character does, and also with Manhunter. I don't remember who did the score for that one. It wasn't Tangerine Dream though, but that's another movie that I really like because of how he uses that score and mood with scenes, shots that help build the atmosphere to it. I felt like this movie was an atmospheric type of movie that hit me where when it needed to. Like, in terms of how different it is, in terms of how different it is for Michael Mann with the rest of his crime movies, I can see why some people would find it a little boring
Yeah.
because again, it's very different. It's not something that he usually
Definitely
does.
be expectations. You know what I mean? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
go in with a Michael Mann film, and you obviously you look at the poster and you think it's all the action that you would see from that time period, and you assume it's just that. But like you said, it takes its time, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Where the first half hour, it's not, I wouldn't call it boring, but it's patience with how it's building up the universe and the world, and especially for stepping out of Michael Mann's typical box at the time. It's I feel like it was him proving to himself that he can do this. So it wasn't a knock on the movie. Similar to what I was talking about with the Big Fish earlier. I don't think anything that I have not positive on the movie are negatives at the same time. They're more neutral. So, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I feel like in terms of with that first half hour, I like how you're saying like it is patient because it is building the world first. It shows you like the backdrop and establishes the characters with the two general's daughters, the Monroe daughters, Cora and Alice, and then later when they introduce Hawkeye, Daniel Day Lewis's character, then he is brought in to protect them, and then he tells them that they can't. Spoilers, sorry people, but I can't avoid this. For there are specific things about it that I have to talk about. But there's that scene where they find the slaughtered Cameron family, and then he tells them that they need to go. They can't afford to stop and bury them because that would leave too much tracks for people, for other Native Americans to find them, because he's trying to protect them, is kind of urgent, or at least for me, it contrasts to that setting tone with how he builds this world, and then he brings these hints of urgency that help build up for me as the film goes along. Like afterwards, he then explains to Cora why he had to rush them. Like he tells them that they had to leave, and there's this like conflict between each other because she thinks that he's disrespecting the dead. But then later, when it calms down, he then explains why he couldn't exactly. Why he couldn't be there for them right at that moment. It's too risky. And then there's also these clashes that he has also with Major Hayward, I believe. Duncan Hayward is Stephen Waddington's character, the uh, soldier who has an attraction to Cora, who kind of friend zones him after she sees how different of a character he and Hawkeye are. But that clash and conflict that Hawkeye and Colonel, I keep forgetting that his name is Duncan or Waddington, but anyway, seeing that conflict build on the sense of urgency that he has in trying to protect the two daughters, and then also having that conflict, I feel like this just builds up all the conflict and all the general turmoils that they have against the different characters. And I feel like that's something that Michael Mann does really well when he focuses on the characters in a certain time period. And I think he also does this really great in The Insider, a few movies later, with Russell Crowe and Al Pacino. which I'd also recommend if you ever get the chance.
I have not seen that one
Uh,
either, so I definitely will write that down.
yeah, and then just seeing him argue with with General Monroe, and how basically I felt like this was the culmination of all these conflicts that he has with the different English soldiers, because he's trying to uh, like he lives now with with the Mohicans, with both Chingachgook and Uncas, and because he's seen a new way of life, and how how he's gone back to the humans because he's trying to help others, but at the same time they feel like he's kind of crazy because he's abandoned the English and gone to live with the Mohicans. And I feel like this how all these conflicts build up on each other. Him with trying to protect all the English soldiers, but the General Monroe not wanting them to abandon their fort at the same time, and he thinks that they're going to be traitors if they do. That just gets me really tense, and seeing how all that conflicts all add up and add up and add up together. And for me, that's a result of how he sets up the movie patiently, and then seeing Cora Monroe, the older daughter, like also rebel against her father because she now sees from Hawkeye's perspective how he's trying to protect them, but there's a lot of stubbornness with the generals and all the soldiers, and it kind of hurts sometimes because it sees the war scenes and the battle sequences, which are visceral, like you said, and which I also really really enjoy. And yeah, that's what appeals to me when I see this movie. I feel like it's him building senses of conflict, not just creating a an atmospheric scope and look on how all the characters are involved in nature. If you're following me, which I hope it's like enough to show why I love this movie, because like I know it's a very anti-man movie
Yeah.
because he does Heat and Collateral and Manhunter, but I really love it. I saw it at the right time when it hit me the most, and that's
So
why
I have two
it gets a lot
questions.
more.
So when you think of this movie, it doesn't get talked about enough. So I feel like these are two questions that either can go in with this mindset, and assumptions can be taken about, or it could be one of those things where it can be avoided because of that. So one, would you consider this movie? And I'm asking you for your opinion, so your perspective. Would you consider this movie a white savior movie? And would you consider this movie biased pro the Mohicans slash anti the British, or do you feel like it's unbiased in its storytelling and how it kind of covers both sides? So what is your opinion on both of those thoughts?
So, in terms of white savior movie, I don't feel like it goes totally into that territory, because at the end, it's not Hawkeye who saves the day. It's Hawkeye and Chingachgook who save the $2. Well, not actually. They don't save the $2. Well, they only save one of them, but it's ultimately Chingachgook who fights against Magua. I, I couldn't remember exactly what Indian tribe they were trying to protect them. It was Huron. I remember that Magua is disguised as a Mohawk, but I couldn't remember what it was that they were exactly. They were Huron, that they're trying to protect them from the Huron tribe. So I feel like it like shows them Chingachgook, the father of Magua, the not Magua, excuse me, Uncas, do enough to help avenge his son's death and protect Korra, that it doesn't go into that white savior territory. I feel like if you're going to argue that it's white savior, you're only focusing on what the poster looks like, because
Yeah.
it's only centered on Daniel Day Lewis.
Which is technically why
But
I asked, because like I said, people could go in with assumptions of the movie and just have that negative bias towards it without even giving it a fair shake. So that's why I'm glad we're talking about this. So keep going.
yeah, so yeah, I don't think it goes into that white savior type of movie. In terms of how it portrays the British and the Mohicans, I feel like I feel like it shows you enough of how the British think and what their mentality is, and their plans are. But I do think it leans more towards the Mohicans, because you see how the British's plans tend to lead towards death, and sometimes unnecessary death. it may be a little biased against the British, but at the same time, I feel like them. Excuse me. I feel like them. I feel like they have a fair chance in showing why they want to carry out these sort of plans, or why the general is so stubborn that makes it kind of like uh, infuriating that he's kind of wasteful, and how he's kind of stubborn and doesn't think that he doesn't act enough to try to save the rest of his soldiers. So like him trying to show how the British react is showing them not only he's showing them their side, but also showing how their side is stubborn. So like I feel like he gives them enough development to show where the British are coming from, but he does lean more towards supporting the Mohicans and Daniel Day Lewis's character Mohawk, and then Chingachgook and Uncas, and how they're probably a little wiser than the British in this area of the forest in terms of how they ought to go against the Hurons and protect themselves. But
And I think that's fair.
yeah.
When you think of a story, you're always gonna have one point of view and one perspective that is the through line of the main. It's very rare where you get a 50-50 split of the two sides. So even if it's 60-40 or even 70-30, to be honest, because if you're gonna go one side, the other side they're villainous or they're the antagonist or however you want to perceive it depending on the story. And I feel like I agree with you. I don't think it's claiming that the British or the whatever are the all evil. It's just telling a story of the time, and it's pretty. It's about as unbiased as you could be for a war-like movie, and I feel like that's. I'm glad you brought that up, or I talked about it, because, like I said, someone could go in that movie just having expectations or whatever and biases going in. So, is this a 5-star movie for you?
I wish it was. I have some issues with the ending in terms of how. So, okay, there's part of the movie that kind of ruined it for me because one of my friends, brought up a point that I had not noticed before, and then when I rewatched it, I'm like, he's kind of right. But there's this one shot right before Alice, the sister that jumps off the cliff, is about to jump off the cliff. There's like these raindrops that come out of nowhere, and and this friend of mine, he said that totally drew him off. That totally uh, took him out of the movie and made him hate it, which to me
It's a
made me
little
feel
extreme,
like
but yeah.
it made me feel like it's a little extreme. He had other issues about the movie that I can't remember at the moment, but he said that was the one moment that he felt like was like, okay, that's it. And when I rewatched it, I'm like, I don't remember there were drops, and then that scene happens, and I'm like, wow, how did I miss that the first time? And like, I don't know how to justify that. I don't know where maybe it was like a slight weather change of something when they were filming it. I don't know, but I don't know. That takes me out of it when I think about it. And I'm sorry to say, it kind of hurts to say that, but yeah, that was something that really bugged me. Is because I was like, I can see where you're coming from, but I still think you're kind of extreme in hating the overall movie. But it's still a 4.5 out of 5 for me.
Okay. So, I don't. Without giving too many spoilers, would you say it's a top tier Joseph movie, or would you say it's just below that top tier, but it's still, a big recommendation from you? Like
It's
I said,
still
I
a
don't
big
want to spoil
recommend.
your 100 or any of your true favorites because I know
Yeah,
you want to save that for a future time. But would you say it's a top tier movie, or is it just below?
I think it's just below for now. I have been trying to rewatch several movies that might make it into the top 100 zone, and this one couldn't quite make it. But I still really, really love it. I think it's one of Michael Mann's best movies. I think that it's one of his best examples of how he demonstrates patience in developing the storylines. And yeah, that's why I love it. Oh, and real quickly, one thing that I also think is important is that he shows Magua's background. The villainous Huron that shows his true colors, that he's not really a Mohawk, he's a Huron. Him showing, man showing his back, or not showing, but telling Magua's backstory and why he has this vendetta against the white man because his people also suffered from it, I think is important because at the same time, you see that Indian chief negotiating between Hawkeye and Magua, and what is the best negotiation that they can come to so that there's no full out war. They want to stop this war, and you can see how he's trying to make both parties happy, and it kind of hurts because you see that he's trying to not. He's not trying to anger Magua, but he's also trying to uh, give some leeway to Hawkeye,
Yeah.
and then ultimately Major Duncan's sacrifice and how he helps save the others kind of is really rings hard for me. And yeah, at the end.
There you go. So, like I said at the beginning when we started the discussion, it was a 2-star movie for me because I was just bad luck. But since I got a chance to rewatch it, similar to Big Fish, I'm debating if I want to go 3 or 4 stars, and I think for this one, I'm gonna go 4 stars because I really like the score, like I said, and the action is really good. And Daniel Day Lewis is Daniel Day Lewis, you know what I mean? And there's nothing about the movie that took me out of it, like the raindrops, where it just made me like have anything anti the movie. And there was enough positives that I feel I could go and rewatch this and have that connection. So because of the action and the visceral moments, I feel like that's like I said, it doesn't have to be emotional connection like I was talking about with Big Fish earlier. It could just be something action, fighting. It could be turmoil, some sort of conflict, or some sort of positivity that I connect to it. And I feel like there was enough here. And like I said, the score is fantastic. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4 star. So it's definitely interesting, and that's why I love this show because I went from this being a 2-star movie to being a 4-star movie, and that's a pretty big jump. So I'm thank you for making me talk about this movie and giving it a second chance. I really appreciate that. So we're gonna go. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, real quickly. I will say it hurts the movie. It hurts the viewer more if they love the book, The Last of the Mohicans, because I read the book and it didn't work for me. But there are some people I know that love the book and do not like the movie because they're two different things. But yeah, that's another thing that
There's also people that
can make
don't
a
like
difference.
The Shining movie because of the book and vice versa. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's all interpretation and
Yep.
subjectivity going in and expectations. So judge it on its own merit. So going into the final, this is the summer, and we're talking about America's pastime, and we're talking about the Sandlot. So I'm gonna let you start, similar to what I did with Last Mohicans. Give us your initial reasoning of why this was low, and you said you rewatched it. Give us your opinions post rewatch. So start with your initial reaction and then your post reaction, and let's compare.
Yeah. So when I first saw this, I was in the middle of, well, not in the middle, but when I first saw this, I was trying to watch as many sports comedies as I could because an opponent picked that as a strength in movie Warzone. And maybe it's just me, but I saw several of them and I was like, maybe this is not my genre. And seeing the Water Boy and Dodgeball and Sandlot, like in that string of movies, that was like, okay, I'm getting tired of all this, and like, yeah, maybe that's just me. That's just me having a thing against the genre. But the Sandlot didn't have as many cringeworthy moments as some of the other movies did. So when you picked the Sandlot, I was like, okay, maybe I'll give it a chance. It didn't annoy me as much as the other movies, so maybe it's just me being on that mentality of like I'm getting tired of seeing all these sports comedies. And when I rewatched, I'm like, okay, okay, well, maybe not that part. Okay, that also is good. Like, so I definitely liked it more. I'll say this right now. I definitely liked it more. like, um, even on the first watch, there were parts that I did really enjoy. Like, I feel like the whole build up and how Scotty feels like he's alone in this new neighborhood and trying to make friends, but he's a very introverted type of person who's scared about what he might do wrong. That and that leads to him having several misadventures with his other buddies that he makes friends with, and then like it all builds up to a kind of interesting climax with the dog and all that. That was more entertaining than I remembered. It was a lot more. It was a lot less annoying than I had remembered, even though I still have my kind of criticisms about it. And also, I do like the ending because I feel like it's them still remaining friends with through after making it all through those types of troubles and making it all through those misadventures, but still making it through the end there as friends, as a baseball team, and still growing in skills, and also learning responsibility because he could have had a different uh, like the way that he handles that ending with the baseball with his dad's Babe Ruth signed baseball. He could have had a different ball to trade in, made it look like it was never there, but he decided to take responsibility for it anyway because it wouldn't feel right if he didn't. And in the end, he grew better out of it. Like that type of character arc with Scotty, I feel like is at least the most admirable thing about this movie. That characters can learn responsibility and grow better for it, and like that was the most admirable thing for me, and how the characters later move on with their lives but still remain friends. That was also kind of cool. I feel like that was a cool ending towards the movie. In terms of what I didn't like, the kids scream way too loud and way too much. Like, I'm sorry, but them dealing with the whole them dealing with all the ways that they tried to get the ball kind of made me like, okay, we get it. You kids are scared. You guys are kids. You feel like the dog is such an enormous beast, which actually I do also like how they portray the dog, the beast, to be this huge creature because from the kid's perspective, it's a monster. Like, it's a beast. So, like, that was a neat touch, I feel like. But calm down on the screams, people. I'm sorry. That was annoying a little bit. It kind of reminded me of the Goonies because that also got me a little annoyed by how much they screamed. But
So Joseph
on the
hates
other,
kids. That's what we
mhm,
understand at this point.
yeah. But maybe I should rewatch the Goonies as well because I did like the Sandlot more than I remembered and expected. The I was able to focus more on the friendships
Yeah.
between the different characters and how they grow better out of it. And yeah, that's my improved review on my improved thoughts and review on the movie.
So without getting into specifics, because it's not about that movie, I'm just curious on your thoughts on Stand by Me and how it kind of goes in comparison to The Sandlot, because they're not like one for one movies, but I feel like there's enough comparisons that you could really do a decent double feature of the PG versus the R-rated version of that friendship and that level of connection with your friends. So I'm just curious, quick one little thing, like, are you annoyed with Stand by Me, or is that a higher tier movie for you?
I need to rewatch it. The one time I saw it, I really liked it because they don't shout as much, even though they probably could have. But among other things, I felt a lot stronger emotional connection at the end of Stand by Me,
That was
which
definitely more
I do.
mature.
Yeah, if it exactly, it feels more mature and less childish with how all these kids react. Ultimately, they're all kids, both the main group of friends in the Sandlot and the four main friends in Stand by Me. They face like more mature situations, and they're also more mature as characters. So I felt more. I lean more towards Stand by Me. The one time I saw it, I do want to rewatch. I've been meaning to rewatch it. I haven't gotten there yet. But yeah, that I do feel more inclined to say like I like Stand By Me a lot more because of the maturity of the characters and the stronger emotional ending at the end there.
Absolutely. So my thoughts on the Sandlot. So obviously, going in, I have an inherent bias because I grew up playing baseball. So a lot of the Sandlot level scenes I connect to like 100%. I've had moments like that where I would go to the park by myself and I would play by myself, and I would have a lot of ghost players and I would throw up the ball and I would hit it, and I had just that imagination. So like that was me as a kid. So imagine those 8 kids before Scotty, and then having Scott join them to make a full team. Imagine that, but only one person. Like that's who I was as a person. Like I loved in the beginning of the movie when Scott was when he was narrating, he was talking about how these kids don't play games, they just literally play, and it's a never-ending game. And it's essentially practice without him knowing the terminology of what practice was. Essentially, that's what he was describing, is they were just having, practice. And that's who I was as a kid growing up. So I'm automatically going to know that I had that bias going in positively, where I have that connection. And I love Benny the Jet Rodriguez, and just how he is just a good dude. Like, they could have written that character where he was just an egotistical prick, and he's like, I'm better than all you guys, I'm the leader of the crew, I'm the leader of the team, we're going to be good. Like, essentially what you've heard stories of, like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, where they're bossy because they know that they're just that good, and in order to get to that point, you have to be that good. You know what I mean? So they could have written this character to be like that, but he's just a good dude. You know what I mean? Like how he just takes Scott under his wing, and it's not a sympathetic thing. It's more of just an inclusion thing. It's a combination of, hey, we've all been there. We all need a friend. You know what I mean? If you have even a speck of interest in baseball, I want to, give you an opportunity to have even more interest and teach you the game and show you the ropes. You know what I mean? So giving him his glove, giving him a new hat. You know what I mean? It's one of my favorite scenes. He was like, "Do you have a fireplace?" Or, you know what I mean? Throw that hat in there. You know what I mean? Just little things like that, where it's just the respect.
That seemed a little harsh. Not gonna lie, I felt like that was a little harsh, telling you to throw it in the fire.
That hat was pretty harsh. But just there's scenes like that where even like where Scott, where he's like, he didn't know who the Bambino was, and everyone's just making fun of him. He's like, oh, and he's like, he lied, and he's like, oh, I thought you meant the Great Bambi. And it's just things like that. They're like the wimpy deer, and he just plays off, and he was able to make it work. And one of my favorite scenes that are just so subtle is when he finally catches the ball, and everyone was like, all right, he's good in my book. And then you have the kid where he's pitching. He's like, I knew it all along. And it's like, at the end of the day, you need that respect, but you don't have to be good at the game. You just have to show that you belong. You know what I mean? And then you can be taught. And I kind of love that it doesn't really have that, hey, we taught Scott the game, and all of a sudden he's pretty good. When the scene where they had the game against the Bullies, and Scott had like 2 hits, you know what I mean? And they didn't even make a big deal about it, because it's not about teaching him the game. It's just including him, you know what I mean? And I love that. And you have Dennis Leary as the stepdad, where you just he goes back and forth. He calls him Dad. He calls him Bill. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where he doesn't know what to call him, because he's just
insecure. Yeah.
And kind of to play off of that, so playing catch, and it's one of those things where obviously I don't have any kids right now, but I can just imagine I have friends who have kids, and they're not athletically gifted, or they just don't have that they're not there yet. So trying to play catch with a kid who's just either doesn't have an interest in sports or just doesn't have a natural ability to be really good, having a simple catch with them, you can just tell that it takes a little more patience and a little more heart. And since the connection, there's a disconnect in their relationship, it really shows that he's not able to grasp the concept of baseball at the time, but once he gets included with Benny, and all of a sudden, boom, he's a pretty good ball player. And that's all it takes, is just really giving that opportunity and that love and just that inclusion, and not just doing it because essentially his mom's making him. You know what I mean? And I really love how it subtly has that there, but also it's clear. You know what I mean? If you don't notice it, you might not make that connection, but I at least do. So I might be reaching there, but I really think that's how it goes, where it's just having that moment. And it's another small moment, but like when Benny gives him his glove, and he was like, come play with us tomorrow, blah blah blah. And he's like, I don't know, like you said, insecure. And then once he does, he like runs and he's like, Mom, guess what? You know what I mean? He's just so happy, and it's just one of those things. That's why Benny's just such a great dude, because everyone has been in that moment where they just want to feel included, or whether they're the new kid, or whether they're the small kid, the unathletic kid, you know what I mean? Whatever. You're trying to fit in, or you're trying to just be included, and you're just trying to get the chance. You know what I mean? And that's why I love that. He's just a good dude. So their friendship, really starts to develop, and it's all just about inclusion. They're like, why is this guy here? We just need a ninth guy. And they're like, fine, whatever. And then he finally makes the catch, and they're like, all right, you're in. You know what I mean? That's all we needed. We just, we need it. It's just, kids. That's just how they think. You know what I mean? And just like the screaming. So you're talking about this. So this is a great. So me and my buddy, we have this thing when we do double features. We like to do connections, but like the weirdest connections. So Big Fish and the Sandlot is an amazing double feature because the imagination and the exaggeration of storytelling. You have the Beast and how he's explained the entire movie, and then you have Ed Bloom of how he would explain all of his stories. You know what I mean? So I just love that parallel
Yeah.
when you think of that, and that's so much fun. And then you have a nice no, I keep wanting to say Edward James Olmos. James Earl Jones. You have James Earl Jones and his character and how he's able to really bring everyone together. And you think of, the Beast as evil, and you think of him as an evil old man, but honestly, he's just lonely. You know what I mean? He's blind. He hasn't had people around him for a long time. So it's kind of a weird way to also parallel that part of you want to include Scott in your storyline and involve him so you can be your friend, and you also just want to give this old man a little bit of attention and show he's not that bad. He just doesn't know how to connect with people because it's been so long. So I love that it just it really brings all these elements of childhood together, and especially in the 60s when it takes place. It's just obviously I didn't grow up in the 60s, but you just
Yeah,
feel
me neither.
yeah. I would hope not. uh,
Some people think I did, but not really.
that's just your taste in movies for the good part. But it just has that magic of what you think of summertime, baseball, and just childhood. You know what I mean? Stand By Me has the quote, "You never have best friends except for like when you were 12," and this movie shows the light heart of it. So I think that's a great double feature, and I feel like that's why I love this movie so much because it's the lighthearted parts of childhood. So depending on your life and what you went through, you can relate to The Sandlot or Stand By Me differently, but you can respect both aspects of how it portrays childhood and summertime, and that's why I really love this movie. So my question to you is, did you play baseball growing up? Athletically, was that ever a thing in general? And what are your just overall opinions on baseball? So, because I know you were binging sports comedies for trivia, but in terms of personally, do you have any connection to that, or is it one of those things where you're definitely on the outside looking in, and is it understandable why you don't connect as much?
So I did play a little bit of baseball, but very minimally. Like I explored using the bat and catching the balls, but never. It never really went anywhere. It was just something that I had as a minor hobby here and there, and I never really grew into anything like that. But yeah, I can see where you're. Excuse me. I can see where you're coming from about how it's like how how that's how you can relate to that with all the kids in playing baseball, how they sometimes imagine that they're that they're having ghost players. What killed it for me is that like I had a short uh like it just felt like I had to run too much when I had ghost players, so I kind of gave up early.
That's fair. That's
So
fair.
like but then again, that was me as a kid, so like maybe I don't know. But yeah. So it didn't really go anywhere, but I can kind of relate to how they enjoyed their time in playing a lot of baseball, even if I didn't play that much as a kid.
So now, like you said, it went up for you. Uh, where does it stack in terms of sports comedies, especially now when you separate it from the lowbrow ones? And where does it stack on 90s? And where does it stack on general, quote unquote, nostalgic level movies like Goonies, Stand By Me, all of that stuff? So where would you compare it to nostalgia movies? Where would you compare it to sports comedies? And where would you just compare it to 90s movies?
Okay, so in terms of sports comedies, it felt like, well, here's the thing. There were parts that I can see where people would laugh at. And maybe this is just a me thing because I didn't grow up with this movie. This was not a movie that is nostalgic to me. So I'm like at an inherent disadvantage with that because I know some people who are big fans of this movie because they grew up with this,
Yeah.
but I didn't. And seeing it from like a grown up perspective, it feels more childish than other movies, like compared to Stand By Me. So I don't quite fully love it, but I can still respect it and see why so many other people grew up with it and loved growing up with it. It was also interesting to finally see where the "You're killing me, Smalls" quote and meme comes from. It
Yeah.
was like, oh, so that's how it all plays out in this movie. So
Spoil
like
what?
I can, so, yeah, and like how. So in terms of nostalgic movies, it's not it's not really that high ranked for me because it's not a nostalgic movie for me, but I do respect the nostalgia that other people have for it. In terms of sports comedies, I mean, seeing it again now made it more tolerable for me. But then again, like I was mentioning, seeing more and more of those movies maybe just hurt me because I was seeing too many at a time. I
Yeah.
just didn't feel a general appeal to it. Maybe I can try out with some other sports comedies, but this now went into a better light than other sports comedies. In terms of 90s movies, it doesn't really go up that high for me. There's
Okay.
just way too many movies that came out in the 90s that I gravitate towards more, either because I don't feel like they're as childish, or because they have, or just because they're different movies. I
Yeah.
don't, they're not like they're just other movies that I prefer. But yeah,
Absolutely.
what else did you say? 90s sports comedies, nostalgic.
Nostalgia. Yeah, that was it. Just those three. So,
Oh, okay,
all right. So your initial rating was 2 or 2.5.
2.5.
Yeah, because I don't think you had any 2 stars that I really disagreed with, so I had to technically change the rule with you for 2.5.
You
I
had
had,
you almost made me watch. You almost picked Elf, right?
yeah, I think that was my initial, but then when I saw this, that's why I cheated with the Sandlot, because I'm a little stronger towards Sandlot, so I cheated a little bit,
Okay.
because it still is against the grain if it's rotten, or not
Hmm.
under 3 stars. But anyway, so initially it was a 2.5 stars because of the drowning of the sports comedies. So now that you were able to separate it and watch it, what do you bump it up to? Because you've already admitted you bumped it up to, but to what do you bump it up to?
So like I'm between like I was initially thinking about giving it 3 stars, but having this discussion more and having this sort of discussion and putting in perspective in terms of how it deals with other topics in terms of like the imaginations like Big Fish and how the nostalgic era of this time like Stand By Me is like, it makes me want to like bump it up a little more to 3.5. At the same time, though, I feel like it still feels a little childish, and I would rather watch those other movies instead of this one. Uh, but on the other hand, I do feel like I enjoyed more out of it than the last time out of it. So maybe maybe I'm leaning more towards a 3.5 than a 3. But like I still don't love it, but there are parts that I do like a lot more, and story arcs and themes that I respect more out of it that led a lot of people to loving it growing up as kids. It's just not a personal favorite of mine, and I don't know if I can like show it to other young kids, but I feel like if they're like maybe a little older than just kids,
I
like
feel like
the kids in
10,
this,
10 or older. Like I feel like 10
maybe,
plus,
maybe,
12 for sure.
maybe. Yeah, I
All
think
right.
so. I think
Yeah.
so. But anyway,
So
yeah.
I'm glad you did that. So if you made it this far into the video, obviously, you enjoyed our discussion. I really appreciate it. We've had one viewer almost the entire time, so I really appreciate you. Shout out to you. And on a rewatch, it's one of those things where, it's a late recording, so I don't take that personal. But I'm really hoping if you made it this far in the video, rank the three, or actually, I'm gonna do this to you right now. Out of the four we talked about, rank them.
Um, Last of the Mohicans, Big Fish, The Sandlot, Dodgeball.
But no. 10 feet of shit and then then dodgeball, right? You're definitely having that separation. Just
Oh,
dodge you hate. No, I'm just teasing.
fair,
And then
fair.
for me, it's Sandlot, dodgeball, Last Mohicans, and then Big Fish. But all are positive ratings for me, so it's one of those things where, like for you definitely have dodgeball at the bottom, like
Yeah.
under the floor, whereas me, they're all floor level or higher movies. So if you made this far in the video, give us your opinions on all four movies. What is your favorite of the four movies? What opinion do you disagree with the most of the four that we've talked about, between either myself or Joseph? And obviously, you can see on screen. If you're not following me on Letterboxd, follow me on Letterboxd, and if you're not following Joseph on Letterboxd, give him a follow. Let's talk about movies. You know what I mean? That's what the Against Grain podcast is. You know, we pretty much have a settled discussion, and I feel like this was a positive. Other than your opinion on Dodgeball, this was a fairly positive, show, and all the thoughts went up except for your opinions on Dodgeball, which I guess it's ironic that you were so low on Dodgeball, but I think it was higher than you expected going in. So you're like, it was 1.5 star, but I was expecting 1 or less. So technically, it's better than I thought. You know what I mean? That's a lot of fun. So let us know your opinions on all four of these movies. And as always, if you made this far in the video, drop a like and subscribe to There Will Be Movies, because the Against Grain podcast is hopefully a weekly thing. You know, we've been pretty consistent for the last 3 weeks, so hopefully it's a weekly thing. And we also have There Will Be Trivia, the Total Recall tournament finishing up, and other shows that I'm in the process of getting rights to and finalize specifics where we can get more engagement in larger panels. So Henry Confidential, Joseph Olivas, make sure you check him on Full Metal and Multiplex. He's doing really good in trivia, and make sure you check him out here on There Will Be Trivia Total Recall. He's going to be playing in round 3 really soon. Henry Confidential, Joseph Olivas, we are out.